Alright, it's been a while, so here's the latest Disney project. All my projects, well, I shouldn't say all, but most of my projects are based off of these cars, the ride cars that you can buy. This is an older one I had to get off of eBay, but it's a Pirates of the Caribbean, obviously. So I wanted to capture a couple of the elements from the ride into this little diorama to display the car. And typically, if you've seen some of the other ones, the other videos I've got, usually there's a few of them that look kind of like this, where it starts out with a picture frame. So I go to the dollar store or sometimes a thrift store and get a really cheap frame and glue foam on it. And we talked about the foam a little bit before, but it's just a 4x8 sheet, 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of foam. It's 1/2 inch thick, and you see these pieces here. I can just cut them on a table saw. You can get them pretty thin. Basically, you glue that foam onto your frame and cut it and sculpt it the way you want. And then here's a piece of foam, also very thin, that's cut real thin. And my wife has one of those Cricut machines that they use for scrapbooking, so I cut the letters out using that machine and glued them on here, painted it up. So just to show you real quick, here's the frame. So they have cheap frames. I usually like to get them that are flat like this, with not a rounded edge or anything. It makes it really easy to glue the foam on. You can see it's 1/2 inch foam glued on, and then I've just cut grooves in it and kind of sculpted it the way I wanted it to give it that brick look. So here's the back. So it's always good to start with a standard frame. A couple of them I built my own frame to begin with, but that's kind of labor intensive when you can go to I think this frame was $1.49 or something, and then included the glass that was in it, and you can barely get the piece of glass for that nowadays. Alright, so we'll start the tour on the left over here. So over here we've got, if you're familiar with the ride I don't know if it's different in Disneyland or not, but Disney World in Florida, you at one point go down a waterfall. You also go through like a mist waterfall, which is what this signifies over here. And it has a face projected up on it. These are kind of out of order. You go through the mist waterfall first and then go down the other waterfall, but for this I kind of had to... It's a loose representation, I guess. So anyway, this is just wood with foam glued onto it and sculpted to kind of look like block work, and just sprayed and soaked in various colors to make it look old and, I guess, nasty. The shale roof on this is actual shale. Where we go fishing, there's a big pile of shale there, and I got a couple pieces and found that you can sand them pretty easily. They break apart in little flat pieces, and you can take a piece of sandpaper and sand the edges and get them kind of curved like this and just glue them on there. The only downside is this part is really heavy because that shale is it's a real heavy rock, I guess. Craft store just had... I'm not real thrilled with this right here, but I was trying to go for a copper look, a dirty copper look. I think I need to make it maybe green, like copper would be if it was as old as this should be. But it's just pieces of copper you can get at the craft store, and I just bent those to form like the top of the edge of the roof there. Then we move along here. We have a lantern. This lantern, see if I can get in a little closer there. If you go to the craft store, it's in the jewelry making section. I don't know what it would be. I guess you would maybe fill that with something and then make earrings out of it, is what it was supposed to be. I just took very fine sandpaper and scuffed the outside of this plastic so it would be foggy so you couldn't see in it very well. And then just basically hung that on there. There's wire running. There's a button over here on the side. But there's wire running up through this post. This is also foam. Out through here and down into this light, and then down through the base over to this other light over here. And basically all this is, if you've ever seen, you can get these at the dollar store. Also, you get 3 little tiny candles from the dollar store. They're electric. They just come with watch batteries in them, and when you turn these little candles on, they flicker. They're supposed to look like actual flame, and you put it maybe in a pumpkin or I don't know what, but they're designed to look like a flickering candle. So I just took those. When I push the button here, you can see it kind of flickers. Hopefully you can see it in the light there. I can't really see it flickering on my side, but hopefully you can see it there. So that's all that is. Also at the craft store, this is just chain I bought. It's real metal. And then just have little tiny nails kind of holding them onto these. These are all foam posts. So I kind of wanted to give it the old school, giant chain look. Now here, the lighting is really heavy here, but when this is on display, you can't see, the lighting isn't quite as bright. I've got a giant light on this so you can see it better, but this is just felt in the back, just so it kind of eats up some of the light, so you can't tell what's back in there. When it, like I said, when it's on display regularly, you can't really tell that that's felt. It just looks like it's dark back there. So this is just to signify that waterfall as it comes, as you drive your boat goes over that waterfall. And I'll talk about the water here in a minute. And then obviously one of the key scenes in there is the pirates that are in the jail cell. So here we are with Pirate Goofy, in the jail cell. I was thinking about doing the dog with the keys sitting outside like they have in the ride, but I didn't think I was crafty enough to sculpt a dog, so I kind of had to go lose that idea. Here we've got a cannonball in the side of the brickwork there. This is a little piece of tubing that something was packaged in, so it's cardboard. And again, you can't, when it's on display, you can't really see back in there, but that hole really doesn't go back in there, but I wanted to give it the, look like an old pipe and water coming out of it. Here, if I go like this, it gives more of a kind of realistic look at it. Some lily pads there. And then over here, where the boat is sailing through, which is going to be the waterfall on this side, this is a piece of plexiglass back here. And the picture of Davy Jones is just glued on the back side, so you can see him on this side. And then the chemical, and I don't want to say chemical, but the stuff I use to make the water out here is the same thing I put on there to give it kind of a hazy effect, and then it's a little paint here and there to give it some white, fuzzy, foamy look to it. The bars in here are just dowel rod, kind of painted and scuffed up to look old and rusty. And then I took a really, and it's hard to see here too, but you can, if you're here, you can see it pretty clearly, but there's like rusty water where it's run down from these bars. I don't know that that's going to show up very well. But just some of the detail you try to think of, if this was a real prison or whatever, over time that would, these are dungeons and wet places, so over time that would probably leak down over and you would get a rusty streak from that. Now the water, I was kind of waiting to talk about that. This is just a piece of, the base of this is just a chunk of wood that I had. So like 3/4 inch thick piece of pine. And then I painted it blue and modeled it a little green and give it a little color. And then glued the paper, these are just paper lily pads on here. And then there's a product called Mod Podge. And I'll show you a picture of the bottle here in a minute, but basically it's like I guess people use it to decoupage things, like you'll put a bunch of pictures on an old bench or something and paint over it with this clear coating, and it hardens up and makes it, kind of a little decoupage, so that's all I did here was I just dabbed the paintbrush over and over. I think this has about 8 coats, but you just take a little paintbrush and put the Mod Podge on it and just dab it everywhere. And when the Mod Podge goes on, it's white. And then as it dries or hardens, it turns into a hardened rubber kind of a substance. When you keep dabbing on more and more, it gives it that ripply effect. And again, I don't know if you'll be able to see that. I'll try to zoom that in a little bit, but it kind of looks wavy. It looks like pretty darn good water, I think, for not even being a specialty water making type thing. It was just something I got at the craft store. So here's the Mod Podge I was talking about that I made the water with. This is a pretty good sized container, 32 ounces. It's made by a company called Plaid. Every craft store I've been to has it, and they have huge selections of it. Like there's all kinds of different colored bottles, and there's gloss and kind of a matte finish. There's different things. I went gloss to make this water, but it's still a pretty good deal. I think this was like $12 or something, which is kind of insane. But if you go to a hobby store and look at the stuff that they use to make water on like train sets and models, you know, different little models, it's way more expensive than this. So this is a pretty good deal. Plus you can do your decoupage stuff if you're going to do anything like that. A couple other elements you couldn't really see on the carpet is I kind of wanted the effect of some water spilling out onto the ground out here. And then also there's a, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a waterfall coming out of this end because there was a gap in the bricks right there. So those were both achieved with Mod Podge, but first I started with something, let me back this up here, something similar to this, like the packaging this is here. Just cut a square out of this, or whatever shape you want. In this case, I cut the shape of the water out of a plastic, like this clear plastic stuff here. Glue it on there, and then Mod Podge, and just build up and build up and build up, and then eventually you get it looks like a puddle. Over here, same kind of effect, except I just took the piece of plastic, the clear plastic, and kept bending it with my fingers until it kind of held that shape. Glued it on there, and then put the Mod Podge on it, and then made sure I was scraping a bunch of Mod Podge off on the edges to make the edges appear much thicker than they really are. Well, that really doesn't want to focus on there, but hopefully you get the idea. And then here's one of those little candles I was talking about from the dollar store. Where I got this, it was a 3-pack for $1. It's just got the watch battery in there. Obviously take the LED out of it, and if you touch the LED right to the battery, it flickers. I don't know if that's something, the battery is too much voltage and it cuts out, or if it's somehow the LED itself is designed to go on and off or dim and get brighter. But something like this makes it much simpler than trying to figure out electronically how to make that happen. So for $1, I had 3 of these, and just wired up the LEDs inside these little earring pieces. Here we are with most of the light turned off. Let's see what we get here. See if you can see the flickering a little better. Obviously in this time frame they wouldn't have had any kind of light bulbs or anything, so that's to kind of to mimic a flame in there. And then basically the whole thing, like I said, is made out of this foam, and then to paint the foam I would do like a kind of a light gray, and then build it up with various dry brush techniques to get the color. You can see there's a bunch of green in here. I wanted it to kind of appear mossy and old and damp. And then when I'm all done with the dry brush, and I want it to look a little lighter on the edges, like it's worn out or cracked, and just go with a lighter color, and sometimes even a bright white. If you do a dry brush technique, it's really cool. If you look on the internet, you can, well, YouTube's a great place. You can find all kinds of dry brush technique videos. Show you how to do that.